So speaking of short,
Yeah.
that's my segue.
Good.
So here's the book.
Beautiful.
And it is a book of short stories. They're intense, I have to say. And they're mostly about women who don't get what they want, which sounds very depressing, but they're actually funny because funny is important.
Mm-hmm. And you're very funny. And we should let people know that's published by House of Anansi Press.
Yes, and it came out 2011.
Yes. Okay, so now give us your short list of books you think people should know about.
Okay, so it's very fun to go back to your bookshelf and find lovely favorites from the past, rather than getting so into the hype of what's new, what's new, what's new. I can't keep up with that anyway. So my first choice is Jonathan Goldstein's Lenny Bruce is Dead. And I knew nothing of this this guy. Of course, now he's everywhere. But this was his first book, and it's very... The reason I chose it and loved it is because it's quirky, it's funny, and it's funny in a kind of high school kind of way where you say, "Oh, I can't believe he said that." And it's the stuff that you think when you're kind of, young, immature, and which is delicious because we've all been there. And it gives you sort of permission to think those things, or as a writer to write those things. Because we do all think very private thoughts, and Jonathan Goldstein actually speaks them aloud in that book.
Fantastic.
My second choice is actually an author, and it's David McFadden, who is still very prolific. And these are some of his earlier books from, this is 1980. It's A Trip Around Lake Erie.
Look at that.
Fantastic cover. Yeah. Coach House Press. And it was to be a series. So there was a trip around Lake Erie and a trip around Lake Huron. So he lives in Hamilton, and he decided to do a series of, he and his family were going to pack into the car because his wife complained she wasn't in his writing enough. So the family packed into the car, and they took this trip around the Great Lakes, and there was to be 5 books. And apparently they split up after the second book, and that was very disappointing for me. But again, they're funny, and they're written episodically. So I'm just going to flash the page. So they're sort of, they're just episodes. Encounters along the road. And the thing that strikes me about these books is the sense of coincidence. And so it occurred to me for the first time as a writer that coincidence is an interesting thing. And then that translates into life, because then you start looking for the coincidences in life. And that's the part that sticks out for me. Again, the humor. Did I say the humor?
Yeah.
And his other little book, so it's David McFadden Day here, is 3 Stories and 10 Poems. Does this appear as a mirror image to you, though, Julie Wilson?
A mirror image?
Yeah, or does it read straight? When we Skype, do we get the mirror image?
Oh, no, I think we're good. I'm like, I can't see myself anywhere in this book.
This is a book called 3 Stories and 10 Poems. And again, I think it's a Coach House book, because Coach House was so amazing. Actually, it's a prototype. It's his prototype book. But there's a gem of a poem in here called 34 Lines About Horses. And this poem has been with me ever since I got this book when I was 16. And it's just a list of 34 things about horses. And it's a gem. For instance, LSD has no effect on horses. Did you know that?
Really?
And horses love the smell of telephones.
Really?
And horses love to carry beautiful naked women on their bare backs.
Oh, that's okay.
That's the truth.
No,
right?
I just came back from Banff, and I felt a disconnect between me and my horse, and clearly I was too clothed.
There you go. You should read that poem.
Yeah.
And my last choice is Robert Zend. Now, he was born in Budapest, but he is an honorary Canadian definitely because he came over, I think, in his 20s, and he worked for CBC most of his life, if I'm correct. And his grave is actually in the Mount Pleasant Cemetery. So, can I say Canadian?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to give it to you.
This is called From Zero to One, and if you see, it's traveled with me and gone through water damage. And I actually found another copy in a secondhand bookstore, but I gave it to somebody else because I loved the book so much. And I thought of giving them this copy, but I thought that's really crappy. So you can find this in the secondhand bookstores. And again, humor. he writes with sort of tongue-in-cheek little folk kind of tales or insights about life, but it's always with a twinkle in his eye. And when I was 16, I had the chance to meet him at a reading, and he had a cigarette case that opened to reveal rainbow cigarettes with gold filters, and I've never met anyone since that has smoked those. And he was in life as he is in his writing, funny, passionate, a twinkle in the eye. And he actually asked my 17-year-old girlfriend if she would go in the closet and neck with him. And it was very sweet, actually. I took no offense whatsoever because that's in the spirit of who he was.
Yeah.
And he was just a lovely person to have met. And so those are my 5 choices.
Wow, 16 seems to have been a real formative year for you as a reader.
It was. I was in a special class called the Dream Class, and David Young led the class, and he brought in all his friends. So each week we had people like Michael Andacci, Margaret Atwood, George Bowering, David McFadden, all the kind of the coach house gang, and we went to the coach house, and I remember they opened up the back storage room and they said, take whatever you want. And I grabbed the thickest, the papers with the books with the most dense paper, like that embossed kind of watercolor paper, and I've kept a few of them over time, but I wish I had grabbed much more.
Wow. I'm so tempted to ask you if LSD has any effect on Margaret Atwood.
I don't know. Has she ever ridden naked on a horseback?
Probably.
These are questions.
Yeah.
So reading as a writer, when I get stuck or when I take time off from writing, I read to stir that part of me again. And there are only certain authors that I discover that can do that for me. I have old favorites I go back to, but I'm looking for those new writers when I read. Those that stir that part of me, that makes me feel like, oh, I have to put the book down right away because I'm ready to write.
Right.
And I was at a salon, a group of women the other night, and they each brought a sample of writing that inspired them. And they talked about the same feeling of having sort of 1 or 2 or 3 books on their desk. And when they got stuck, they would go to that book, just flip it open to any page, read, and then they would be back inside their writing brain.
Right.
And so I started to think about how it's kind of like if you have a religion, you would go to your Bible, whatever that source is, for spiritual renewal. And I think writers do that. They have their books on their table, and those are the ones they go back to remember how to write when they get stuck.
Do you have your one?
I do. Well, I do. Lisa Moore, her short stories Open, which I have on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
So that
what is it about Open?
It's short stories, and she just plays with form, and she tells the truth. Again, I look for that in a writer, someone who just rips it open, and you think, oh my God, that's so right. And Miranda July, No One Belongs Here More Than You. She's not Canadian. Am I allowed to hold that up?
Yes.
But I have my Lisa Moore, but she's not within my hand's grasp. But she definitely is someone I return to, her short stories in particular. Yeah.
I think Joe Brainerd might be mine. And of course, why have I completely lost the name? Is it I Remember?
And why Joe Brainerd?
Do you know the book at all?
No.
It's very, 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 very teeny tiny reflections. And in particular, it's a lot of creative writing teachers use the book in their class because it's reflections on him growing up in the I think the 40s and the 50s. But it's just observations about just about his life, tiny little astute observations. And it's the sort of writing where you can turn to almost any page. And what I like about it is it stirs the imagination, but it just reminds you that, of course, you have your own collection. So when you open it up, it gives you permission just to sort of like fire off into your own past. And you know what I think it is? I think because it's actually been bound and printed and published and has a price point on it, it also gives you permission not to say, oh, this is real writing, but it gives you permission just not even to think about whether or not it's real writing, because it's here, it's in front of you, it's a book. And so you, like as an object, I think you give it some sort of reverence, you respect it, and so you actually invest and try harder to look for meaning than if, I don't know.
Permission is the one word that all these women writers talked about the other night, about reading something that gives you permission, either through content or form. Yeah. and without plagiar, like when you're reading someone that inspires you, it's, you know, you have this, oh, am I going to plagiarize this later? If I read 25 books a year as a writer, is all that stuff going to somehow seep into my writing? But that's not what it is. It's more about the feeling.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about Joe Brainerd, Kilter was one I was also gonna, because that rocks. That's cream of the crop if we're talking short fiction, microfiction.
I've never seen that cover. That's a new cover, I think, isn't it?
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that was shortlisted for the Giller. I've got the year wrong. I want to say 2006, but I could be wrong on that.
It's a 2003 publication, so I don't know.
Okay, it must have been. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Are they always shortlisted in the year they're published? Of course.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm wrong on that. But yes, that's another example of a book that gave. Well, that book gave me permission to even begin scene reading, I think, because it's all microfiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to talk about scene reading, Lenny Bruce is dead. I saw somebody in the Vancouver airport reading this, and I've never seen anyone read this book, and I so regret not going up to that person, because I just want to know what the heck they were thinking when they were reading it.
I forget. I love readers, man. Yeah. Okay. This is fantastic. I think this is well, I'm inspired, so I have to go.
Okay. Bye, Julie Wilson.
Bye, Julie Wilker. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Take care.